Um, while we're waiting, I'm just going to just talk about the purpose of the community of practice. I've been doing these community of practices for several years now, and when I first started, it was more like a webinar where it was a learning opportunity, and it was an opportunity for you to sit back, put your feet up on your desk, and listen to a speaker, and kind of a one-way transaction. And I've been working hard this year to try to turn these community of practices into buckets of conversation, and really providing an opportunity for people to network and build relationships. Because I'm hearing, we go across Canada, and what I'm hearing is that people feel alone in doing this work. And this is an opportunity for you, those on the call, and there's 200 people on this community of practice, to build connections and relationships, and exactly what we're going to be doing today, sharing our stories and our lessons learned, and build resources so that we can share. It's all about reducing duplication, maximizing our resources, and learning together. The other two kind of key purposes of this community of practice is to make your work in ABCD easier. So we just did the ABCD at a glance document. So we went out there and we found out what is ABCD that you could use to start building the case to doing this work, giving you the kind of annotated bibliography of what's out there so that it's easier for you to find resources and maybe dive deeper. And lastly, it's that container for questions. So when you're stumbling or you're wanting to do something, you don't know how to do it, this community of practices is where you would come and ask your questions with your peers and learn and share together. So I just wanted to go over that and let you know that this is your space, your container to make it what it is. I am not the expert. I'm not doing this on the ground. I'm just sharing and connecting and pulling resources together. So you are all on the call the experts, and I actually really look forward to hearing your story and your work, and to be able to share all that across Canada and the US. And we actually are international in this community of practice because we have people from the UK and Australia and New Zealand. And so this is a really, really great wealth of information for everybody. And so I just wanted to explain that, and hopefully encourage you to connect with me about doing a future community of practice with your resource tool or question. Does anybody have anything to add? Any questions, comments, concerns before we go on? No? Okay. We'll go to the next slide. So just some technical considerations. This is a live interactive session, and so while people are speaking, we just ask that you mute yourself, and you'll see a little microphone on the left-hand toolbar. So just mute yourself, or if you're on the phone, mute yourself, so that we don't get any feedback and we can hear the person speaking. But you can also, and if you don't have a microphone or are able to speak, please use the chat box, and we'll make sure that we'll read your comments, and you'll find that little speech bubble on your control panel. So we're going to look who's here. We're going to see who's on the call today. So if you could just, your name, your location, and I thought we would just talk about your comfort level with ABCD. Are you new in it? Are you, just implementing it a couple of years, or are you seasoned and know what you're talking about? So I'm just going to go with what I see across my screen, and the first person is Christine, and who's on the phone, I believe.
Yes, there is a *6 to mute and unmute too.
Okay.
My name is Christine. Right now, I'm located in Cambridge, Ontario. Though I work with a national association. I'm with Kin Canada, so Kinsmen and Connect Clubs of
Mhm.
Canada. Um, so I'm actually a very interesting role because I'm involved in a way where I'm supporting and we're trying to encourage our clubs to implement best practices of asset-based community development in their own community. So I don't actually get to have that hands-on work. I'm trying to um, find resources and find different ways of learning to be able to share those with the people on the ground. So that's me.
That's great. That's great. I'd love to hear more about how you're rolling that out, and if we can support you in any way, let me know.
Perfect. Thank you.
Laverne.
Laverne just shared in the chat box that she's
Oh,
having some technical issues, so I'm just trying
okay.
to help her out.
Okay, the next one is Knuckles. Okay. Brian. There you go. This is not going to be very interactive if we can't get people on to speak. Katrina?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Katrina Lamar. I'm a community health facilitator with Interior Health. I'm located in Kelowna, BC. I am fairly newish to ABCD, like of a few years, but definitely not an expert in it. And my main role is to support communities to create environments that support good health.
Perfect. Thank you, Katrina.
Thanks.
And Knuckles in Montana and new to ABCD. Welcome. Brian, I see you there, but you're on mute. Let's see if I can unmute you. Hannah, can we? Oh, there. Oh, I think your internet. Because it's your bandwidth, so you're coming out sounding like a robot. If you want to just type in the chat box. Okay. We have Megan.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, so Megan Adams, and I work as a health promoter in the Chief Public Health Office in Prince Edward Island. Heather knows kind of better than other folks on the line about my involvement with ABCD, but relatively new, learning and trying to implement some more strength-based approaches within our community and to support them in achieving their goals. So yeah, happy to be here.
Welcome. Thank you. I have NT Regun. I have Catherine.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I am out of Sarnia, Ontario, and I work in public health. And I'm fairly new to ABCD and just community development in general.
All right, perfect. Welcome.
Sorry, so it's Nancy Tragana. Sorry, I have a name. So I am from Dauphin, Manitoba.
Okay.
My role in the organization is innovation and quality improvement, but I do a lot of work with community engagement regarding a community health assessment that we write.
Okay.
And so I'm kind of new to the principles of ABCD, but really hoping to be able to implement them in some of the work that we're doing.
Great. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you.
And there's a few people on the phone call that don't have names, so just speak up.
Hi, this is Ann Todd. I'm listed under administration, but I work for Razor Health as a healthy living coordinator in the Hope area. And I've been aware of ABCD for many, many years, but haven't actually implemented it on a regular basis. Here to learn.
Okay. Oh, great. Welcome, Ann. Last call for anyone who wants to speak up. Okay, you can please type in the chat box if we missed you, just so that we know where you're from and your level, and we can make a better connection with each other when we know our names and where we're from. We'll just move on. So I'm really excited to have another story about rural ABCD, and we're going to hear from Amy and Reverend Jackson about their journey. So Hannah, can you stop sharing, and then we'll.
So yeah, you can see the slides, Heather and Hannah?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, thanks for having Reverend Jackson and I on. I was on the webinar. I've been part of the learning community for a while and a follower of Tamarack, and was on the webinar last month and was really interested in seeing what others are doing in a rural context. And I think, Heather, you had asked if there was anybody else who wanted to share. I think I just emailed you that we've been at this for a while, and I thought that we might have a story that you could be interested in hearing. So I'm Amy Moritz. We haven't introduced ourselves yet, and I'm a social change consultant. I've been a practitioner, trainer, coach in the ABCD space for over 15 years, and I am from Memphis, Tennessee. That's where we're sitting today.
Yes, I'm Reverend Joe Jackson, the former pastor, Spirit of Truth United Methodist Church, now retired, but the conference gave the facility as a gift to us for $1, so we're thankful for that. The Mason Caregivers, I'm the coordinator, and we're still pursuing our goal to build partnerships, relationships in the community to help those that are least, less, and lost.
One of the things I thought I would tell you, just a little bit of context for what we're going to share compared to last time, for anybody who was on your webinar last time, is I remember in reading the case study and in hearing the story, that you guys were really fortunate to have some institutional partners that were part of the process. And in the Mason, Tennessee context, in the story that we're going to share, I thought just to set your expectations. This has been a really very grassroots effort and very organic, and really without any major institutional partners. When this journey began about 10 years ago, I was the executive director of Center for Transforming Communities, and that was their institutional partner in Mason. CTC is a nonprofit that's a capacity building intermediary. And our primary audience has always been churches. And in Memphis, for example, we have 3,000 churches in a metro area of about 1 million people. And so one of the premises behind the capacity building work that we did is that churches are untapped assets. And if we could tap into that, they could be catalysts for strengthening the communities where they are. Can I talk about how we met?
Okay. Yes, I had been in Mason, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years. In every community where I pastored, I always had some kind of outreach to the community. But here, it just seemed like, there was nothing available. The school and the and the city had closed several years ago. And so basically everybody just did their own thing. There was nothing to bring the community together. And there was some basic needs that was needed. And so my district superintendent called me and asked me that I want to go to a training with about developing a Shalom community. I didn't know what it was, but I know the word meant peace. So I said, I'll join in. And so I came and participated in a 6-month training program with several people from the area. And so that was it. I got a model, I got a vision for what we could do in the community. And so that's what we got together and started.
So I'll talk just a little bit about the process that Reverend Jackson talked about, the Shalom process. Basically, as he said, it's a 6-month community coalition formation process, and it has asset-based community development as its foundation. And the goal is to build a coalition of partners for a geographic area. It could be an inner city neighborhood, it could be a small town like Mason, Tennessee. And the work begins with doing some basic asset mapping with the community about what their assets are. And the goal at the end of the 6 months is to have the coalition functioning and to have a plan of action. You see 6 bullet points here. We refer to these as the threads that we talk about throughout the 6-month process. And so I'll just briefly tell you what each of those are. Since our main audience does start with a church, many churches are really good at acts of charity, so food pantries and clothes closets. This formation process really encouraged both the church and their partners to think about actions that were going to lead to long-term sustainable and systemic change. The H is a thread that we weave through to really encourage the newly forming community group to really look holistically at what it would look like to work for the well-being or the health of the place. One of the tools we use is something that you may be familiar with called social determinants of health. That concept says that 70% of what determines an individual's health outcomes has to do with the place where they live. And that then includes, could be the economic environment, the education environment, housing, and so forth. Asset-based community development, right in the middle, and the foundation. Love of God, self, and neighbor, which is a really important concept to Christians. Organized for collective action, actually turning all of this into something actionable, and doing it collectively and doing it across cultures, faiths, sectors, so that we're really, it's not just a program of a church, but really the church becomes the catalyst of a community coalition who's got a shared vision and a common sense of action. Those first letters spell the word shalom, which Reverend Jackson has also said. It often is translated as peace, but also has this, it's a Hebrew word that has this sense of well-being, holistic well-being. And one of the favorite definitions that I've been taught over the years is a definition that says nothing missing, nothing broken. And so one of the things that inspires our work is, what if every neighborhood, what if every town, what if every community was a place where there was nothing missing and nothing broken? So I'm going to do a next slide, and Reverend Jackson's going to talk a little bit more about Mason, Tennessee, the context, and a little bit about what it looked like 10 years ago.
Okay, our population is, it says 1,400 people, but 600 of those are prison inmates. And so it's approximately, 800 residents. The racial makeup was 63% African American, 20% white, 9% Hispanic. But what we recognize is that there was just no sense of community. People never got together. They never did community projects to help each other, do anything for each other. So this concept of loving God, self, and your neighbor was great for us. because that's my selling point when I went out and talked to the pastors and talked to me. But the community had no doctor, no health service. You had to go outside. They had no recreation. They didn't even have a basketball goal. They didn't have education, recreation, and just a place where the community could come together for fellowship and have healthy family atmosphere. So, and then the spiritual part, I mean, we had plenty of churches. They would meet every Sunday and they were preaching and teaching the word. But, they, like me, when I was pastor for those 5 years, it was just hard to get out in the community, and it was difficult to get people to be involved in the community. But I learned something from the training that Amy gave me, Shalom. I didn't need the whole congregation. I just needed one. So I would go to the pastors and ask, just give me a representative from the church. I said, I know you're busy, give me one. And so that's how we got the people on our board. And so what's happened to us is basically that we had no interest in doing anything because there wasn't nothing effort. And God used us to start some things that I'll share later.
Can you talk a little bit about what the coalition looks like and some of the things you did?
Right. First thing I realized we had to do something so that people would see us, that we were doing something. So we decided to open up a food pantry. And that's been a real blessing to the community. We're basically the only food pantry there in our area. And we serve about 40 families every month. And the reason is because there are other food pantries that are around that's much bigger than us, but ours is focused on the immediate Mason community. Well, what that did, that started bringing people to me. That's how I got my team, is that they would come to the food pantry and say, I want to help. And so I told them, well, I was trying to organize a Shalom committee, and they'd be involved. But the community responded very well to the food pantry. We have volunteers and we have the clients are all excited, and we're looking for doing some more things with the community through the food.
Can you talk about this project?
Yeah, the second thing we looked at is that there was no community activity for the community to come together for fellowship and get a sense of, our vision and stuff was to build a family-like atmosphere where we look after each other like in old days when I grew up. And so what happened is I went to the mayor and I asked mayor, why don't they have community festivals? And he said, we used to have them 5 years ago, but he said, I'd be willing to support one, but I can't go out there and get the people. I said, well, we'll go out there and get the people. And so that because we had started food pantry and started building a relationship, we got a team of 8 people from 8 different churches. And we went through the community and got some organized, and we partnered with the city and had our first Mason Community Unity Festival. And now we've just finished our 7th year.
7th year, that's great. And then want to talk a little bit about this change that happened?
Yeah, the second thing, another thing that I learned from the training with Amy about partnering with city government. And so I noticed one thing when I went to city meeting, there was there was a couple of blacks, but they were real old. And they were just basically there to ditto everything else everybody said. And I said to myself that we need new blood. We need some young people bring vision to the city for the future. So we went out and recruited people to run for office. Well, we got several to run, and so what happened is that one of them who ran was promoted to the mayor's position, and she did a good job. But just this year, they voted in another mayor, and that's Mr. Emmy Goodman. And the thing about that, now what we learned, what I was trying to do is have a salt and pepper team in head city. I didn't want all black and I didn't want all white. I wanted us to work together. But what happened is that once the blacks saw that they could get in position, this time they got all the seats. But I'm happy to say that the mayor, we just finished the event this weekend. He's partnering with me with everything that we're doing. So I'm happy about that.
One of the things that I've always celebrated about that story is the systemic change. And so now the government looks much more like the people that they serve. And that was a huge change that came out of this asset-based initiative. I think the next slide starts to sum us up, but I didn't know if you wanted to talk about any lessons that you feel like you've learned and kind of where you see things going.
Well, a couple of things is that one, I don't know where you are, but I know I just came back with this train. I said, Lord, how are we going to do it? And what happened, like I said, that we started getting people to come. But then what we were going to do with them? Well, we was doing the food pantry. We started the Unity Festival. But see, that's good. But what my thing is to teach values plus meet needs. So when we would have our festival and stuff, I would talk about people volunteering to serve each other. And one thing we learned about assets of people, that everybody had a skill. Everybody throughout their life, I don't care what the education level, they had learned something they could help somebody else with. So that's what we communicate to the community. And I'm glad to say today, it's not us. The Mason Caregivers just started this community stuff, the food pantry, and working with people in need. And now, I would say I just went to a Thanksgiving activity where 10 churches had adopted the local elementary school, and that was not in existence. And so they're going to pour their resources into that elementary school, and we're in partnership with them. And so we're excited about how that has blossomed through what we try to do. But then we have a summer program. We said we wanted a tutoring program because I had experienced many of my kids dropping out by the time they were 16 in school because they couldn't read and write and count. And, you know, you can't make it in school. So we had a vision for a tutoring program. So now we got a summer tutoring program to prepare the kids to go back to school. And first year we had 15, second year we had 25, and last year we had 50. And we were having problems getting us volunteers because the adults that could volunteer, they worked, then the older people didn't have transportation. So what God showed us, used the teenagers to tutor the elementary. And so that's our model now. And we're so happy about that. And then the young people that are coming, I mean, the 25 to 35 partnered with me, the Mason Caregivers, to do the community festival. And they are on fire. They did something for Halloween. They did partner with to do the summer children and youth block party. And so I'm just very happy. The lesson I've learned, I tell you, prayer, build relationship one-on-one, build partnerships with the government, with the pastors, and then show them the need, open the doors for them, and they'll do it. They're looking for something to do. They just didn't know exactly how to do it, but now they are beginning to follow our lead. And I'm happy. I don't need no credit. You know, I'm happy to see that they're getting out in the community now, the churches I'm talking about, and doing the work God has called us.
So the last slide that I have, and then that'll kind of finish what we had prepared, Heather, is I thought it was really interesting that this is the framework that you guys shared last time, and how much I thought it did kind of mirror what our experience. So definitely that orange bubble, mapping the assets, is where this all started 10 years ago with the asset mapping, and really setting that was the context, not shifting that lens from not just seeing the problems and needs, although they are there, but to shift the lens to see the assets and the abundance of the resources that are there. And then Reverend Jackson, I don't know if you want to say anything about building relationships of trust, but I know watching your story, that's been just so important. Yeah, how you guys have succeeded. And I think the mobilizing the assets, even from back to the food pantry, bringing different resources together to share around that. The your kind of tan bubble to convene the community and build the plan was very much a part of that 6-month formation process, and something that Reverend Jackson continues to kind of coalesce the people together around a shared vision of what could be. And then the blue bubble, probably in a little bit smaller scale than what you all talked about last time, but definitely there's been opportunities for the team and Mason to leverage some external resources, particularly in the form of small grants. So while I was in the capacity of leading Center for Transforming Communities, because we were in relationship with Reverend Jackson and the team and knew their priorities, as we saw funding opportunities, we could help connect him to those funding opportunities. So I think that's a good start at the framework.
That's great. Thank you. And it's funny, it is funny how very different communities, and yet there's a lot of similarities on how to do the work. And the thing is also knowing your community and where it starts. And I'm probably a broken record, but Cormac Russell says, when you've seen one community, you've only seen one community. And so, you know, there's no cookie cutter in doing this ABCD work. And I really liked how you identified the resources, the assets, and the gifts. And you said, where is it? You said about that once you start building the relationships, you have people to ask. So you build the relationship, you understand what their gift is, and then you're able to identify their gift and say, you know what, you have a gift for planning events. Can you come help us in this big event we're planning? And so, and it's human nature to want to help, but we don't want to step on boundaries or you know, like get involved in somewhere where I'm not wanted, right? So making sure you do that ask and building relationships and the trust and understanding and saying, hey, you know, would you like to help? And most people won't say no. They'll usually say yes, but I can only do it a little time because I'm really busy. But they'll never say no. And the fact that you used, you know, your tutoring program, and you know, it grew and it grew, and then you're thinking, how do we sustain this? And going to the teenagers, that is a resource, an asset, a gift that we don't utilize enough. And so I love the fact that you involve the teenagers in the tutoring. Not only does it build their leadership skills, but it also builds their confidence. And so it's a win-win. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask? Comments? Okay, so we will move on. The second half of this. Oh wait, we do have a question. So Laverne is curious about the Caregivers Corporation. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay, well, we're a nonprofit. What happened when I got ready to retire, we decided to apply for nonprofit status, and attorney in Memphis gave it to us as a gift to take us through the process. And so that's what it is. It's a nonprofit organization.
So they call themselves the coalition calls themselves the Mason Caregivers. And then after a little while, they decided to incorporate. Yeah, mm-hmm. In the United States, that's often a necessary step you have to take in order to access some grants. And so that helped them be able to access some of the resources as well.
People get credit, you know, for their giving to them on their taxes. But they can get it.
Okay. The second part here is to talk about the ABCD principles. And so the principles help guide the work of ABCD. It emphasizes the strengths and the connections. It's about citizen leadership, and it recognizes that individual gifts become powerful when they're connected together. And we just heard a story about how that happens. And in our experience, communities that collaborate and use ABCD principles are more successful at addressing complex issues like poverty, equity, community safety, community well-being, because it does harness the talents, the knowledge, the strengths of diverse perspectives. And so here, as you see on your screen, are the principles for ABCD. I'm just gonna trying to figure out where that noise is coming from. So everyone has a gift. Each person in a community has something to contribute, and I really liked how Reverend Jackson really talked about that and gave some good examples about that. Relationship building community, people must be connected for sustainable development. And again, the story we just heard really emphasized that. Putting citizens at the center, and they must be viewed as actors, not as passive recipients. Leaders involve others, so the strengths come from a broad base of community action. So there's lots of things happening, whether it's a block party to advocating at the municipal level. People care, so listening to people's interests. Listening, because a lot of the times people don't know what gifts and assets they have, or we don't know what the gifts and assets in our community. So really listening to the interests and making that connection of where that person or that resource or that gift can play within the bigger picture. And also listening as in conversation. So hosting, talking, drink lots of coffee, have lots of potlucks, but it's getting the decisions that come from the conversations and people are truly heard. And then the last one is ask. So generating ideas by asking questions instead of giving solutions. And coming from a municipal background, I am, and I'm going to say have come to community with solutions, and I wanted them to pick the solutions versus asking questions.